Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where a simple dinner invitation could quietly become your last. In medieval castles lit by candles and smoky hearth fires, nobles didn't always fight their enemies with swords. Sometimes the deadliest weapon was hidden inside a silver goblet, a honeyed pear dessert, or a cup of spiced wine passed across the feast table with a polite smile. You'll wander through shadowy halls, monastery kitchens, herb-filled still rooms, and whispered conspiracies as we uncover the secret ways medieval nobles poisoned their enemies, or at least convinced everyone they did. So before we begin tonight's dark and sleepy journey through the medieval world, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these immersive historical stories. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let the bells of the old castle guide you into the night. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the dripping shadow of a medieval gatehouse, while cold rain slides from the battlements and patters softly onto the mud around your boots. The road behind you has become a ribbon of black mire churned by ox carts, pilgrim feet, and horses that smell faintly of wet leather and old hay. Ahead, the town walls rise out of the evening mist like damp stone cliffs, their watchfires flickering orange through the drizzle. Somewhere beyond the gate, monastery bells ring the last hour before full dark, slow and hollow across the river fog. A guard wrapped in a fur-lined cloak squints down at you as if travellers arriving after sunset are personally responsible for winter itself, which, to be fair, is very much the mood of medieval gatekeepers everywhere. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. They speak endlessly about grand cathedrals and noble courts, but somehow forget to mention the smell of wet sheep lingering in every alley. You pull your cloak tighter and stamp warmth back into your feet. Already, your hands ache from the cold. You probably would not last a week out here without complaining about the straw mattresses alone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the rain drums softly on the wooden gate overhead, feel free to comment your location and local time as you settle in for tonight's journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gate creaks open just enough to admit you sideways. Inside, the town smells of smoke, damp wool, onions frying in old grease, and river water that has seen entirely too much history. Rushes cover the stone beneath your boots inside the entry passage, though they are soaked through and mixed with mud from hundreds of feet. A sleepy clerk at a narrow table scratches your name onto parchment with an ink-stained quill while a candle gutters beside him. No one can quite agree whether town clerks write slowly because of care or because they simply enjoy making travellers stand in drafts longer than necessary. You hand over a small copper toll coin and step deeper into the crooked streets. The town folds around you in layers of shadow and torchlight. Timber houses lean over narrow lanes like tired old men listening for gossip. Rainwater drips steadily from wooden eaves into shallow gutters running beside the road. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once and then again, as though reconsidering whether the effort is worthwhile. You pass a baker closing his shutters for the night. Warm steam escapes briefly into the cold air, carrying the smell of coarse rye bread and honey cakes. The scent nearly stops you where you stand. Nearby, a fishwife throws dirty water into the street without warning, missing your boots by less than a saint's mercy. At the centre of town rises the keep itself, perched on a mound above the clustered roofs. Its windows glow faintly behind curtains of rain. Torchlight moves along the walls like drifting stars. You can hear horses snorting within the stables below, and the distant clang of iron striking iron from a smithy still at work. The inn nearest the square is already crowded. Inside, the common room hums softly beneath soot-black rafters. Beeswax candles burn low on the tables, mixing with the smell of ale, smoke, damp cloaks, and onion pottage. Travellers dry gloves beside the hearth, while servants weave carefully between benches carrying trenchers of smoked fish and dark bread. You settle near the fire, grateful for warmth at last. Across from you sits an old carter whose beard holds enough rainwater to irrigate a monastery garden. He glances toward the keep while turning a wooden cup slowly in his hands. "Another feast tonight," he mutters. His voice carries that particular medieval tone suggesting either important news or complete nonsense. Sometimes both. You ask what sort of feast. The old man shrugs. Lord Edric entertains noble guests from the southern valleys, wine from Aquitaine, musicians, swan pie, they say. He pauses. And tasters? That word settles into the room differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly enough for several nearby travellers to pretend they did not hear it. A servant girl passes carrying ale. At the mention of tasters, she touches the little iron charm hanging at her neck. Some swear iron protects against wicked intentions, though even now it is hard to tell whether people truly believe such things or merely fear not believing them. You lean closer to the hearth while rain rattles faintly against the shutters. The old carter continues in a lower voice. 3 winters ago, Lord Bernard died after supper in that very keep. Fine 1 hour, dead before dawn. A merchant beside him snorts softly, or so they say. Or so they say, the carter agrees. That is the nature of noble poisonings in this age. No one ever speaks plainly. Death arrives wrapped in whispers, hidden beneath spices and wine and prayers muttered too late. Physicians argue about humours. Monks argue about sin. Servants argue about who washed which cup. Meanwhile, everyone continues eating. You warm your hands near the flames while listening. The merchant pulls apart a loaf of bread. "My cousin worked kitchens there once," said the Lord kept a silver serpent spoon. "A what?" "A spoon carved like a snake, supposed to darken if poison touched it." The old carter laughs through his nose, and did it. Apparently not often enough. A few nearby listeners chuckle quietly into their cups. In truth, medieval nobles trust almost nothing completely. They carry saints' relics sewn into clothing. They hire cupbearers to taste wine first. Some even keep unicorn horn at table, though what they call unicorn horn is usually narwhal tusk traded through distant northern ports at impossible prices. Some swear powdered emerald protects the stomach from poison. Others believe pearls ground into wine can reveal hidden venom. A few desperate souls simply consume tiny amounts of poison daily, hoping their bodies will learn to survive it. Those experiments tend not to receive repeat customers. The innkeeper arrives with a bowl of pottage thick with barley and leeks. Steam curls upward into your face. You eat slowly while the fire crackles and travellers murmur around you. Outside, bells ring again through the wet darkness. A thin monk enters the inn, carrying a dripping satchel beneath his cloak. Water pools beneath him as he removes his hood. His face is pale and narrow, his fingers stained black with ink. Several people glance his way immediately. Monks hear things. The innkeeper pours him ale without being asked. The monk drinks once, wipes rain from his brow, and says quietly, "The keep physician has been summoned." No one speaks for a moment. The old carter lowers his cup. "Tonight," he asks. The monk nods. Now even the hearth seems quieter. Somewhere outside in the town square, hooves strike wet stone at a hurried pace. The monk glances around carefully before leaning toward the fire. Servants whisper the southern lord took ill during supper. A draught slips beneath the shutters then, carrying the smell of river mist and chimney smoke into the room. The candle beside the hearth flickers low enough that shadows briefly stretch across the walls like long black fingers. No one can quite agree afterward whether fear truly entered the inn at that moment, or whether it had already been sitting quietly beside the fire the entire evening. You finish the last of the pottage slowly while the rain continues falling beyond the shutters and the distant keep glows above the sleeping town. And somewhere high behind those torchlit windows, nobles continue eating carefully from silver plates while servants watch every cup that changes hands. The rain eases sometime after midnight, though the town never fully dries. Water still drips steadily from roof beams and gathers in the crooked lanes below the inn windows. You wake before dawn to the sound of the monastery bells rolling across the misty rooftops, low and heavy like iron swinging under water. The common room has changed shape in the night. Travellers lie wrapped in wool blankets beside the dying hearth, while a pair of merchants snore beneath the table scattered with walnut shells and empty cups. The old carter from earlier sleeps sitting upright against the wall, mouth open, still clutching his cap as though someone might tax him for losing it. Honestly, medieval sleeping arrangements have the overall elegance of abandoned luggage. You rub warmth back into your hands and step outside into the cold blue hour before sunrise. Smoke curls upward from chimneys into a pale sky streaked with winter clouds. The keep looms above the town like a dark ship grounded upon the hill. Already servants move along its walls carrying baskets, firewood, and bundles of rushes to freshen the floors before the day fully begins. The streets below remain muddy and slick. A butcher drags open his shutters while geese wander noisily through puddles, searching for absolutely nothing of value. Somewhere nearby, a woman beats rugs against a wooden railing with the grim determination of someone fighting ancient enemies. You follow the upward road toward the keep. The climb winds between stone houses and narrow workshops where candlemakers, leather workers, and smiths begin their day beneath soot-black rafters. At one doorway hangs a small bunch of dried herbs tied with red thread. Some swear certain plants keep away wicked spirits or envy from neighbours. Others hang them simply because everyone else does. At the gatehouse, guards examine visitors carefully. News has already spread. You hear it in fragments. The southern lord, collapsed after the third course, could not hold down wine. Physician bled him before dawn. No one says poison outright. Medieval people rarely rush toward dangerous words when gentler ones will do. Inside the outer yard, servants hurry across the wet stones balancing platters and barrels. Stable boys brush steaming horses beneath the shelter of wooden awnings. The smell of damp hay mixes with roasting onions from the kitchens below. You manage entry among a cluster of tradesmen delivering winter supplies. Nobody notices one extra traveller in weather-stained boots when the household itself feels unsettled. The great hall stretches before you beneath towering rafters blackened by generations of smoke. Long tables still bear traces of the previous night's feast. Bones lie piled upon trenchers beside half-drained cups of wine. Beeswax candles slump in silver holders like exhausted soldiers after battle. A noble feast always looks less elegant the morning after. You spot servants scattering fresh rushes over the floor to mask spilled drink and lingering smells. The herbs mixed among them release sharp scents of lavender and mint beneath your boots. Medieval halls rely heavily on the strategy of throwing pleasant plants directly onto unpleasant problems. At the high table, silver dishes remain untouched while nervous household officers confer in hushed voices. One servant whispers near you. The physician says spoiled fish. Another shakes his head immediately. Then why is the cupbearer locked away? That catches your attention. At the far side of the hall stands a narrow door guarded by 2 men-at-arms. Behind it, somewhere deeper in the keep, the cupbearer waits under suspicion. Few positions in a noble household carry such quiet danger. The cupbearer stands close enough to power to smell the wine on a lord's breath. Yet one mistake can end in torture, hanging, or disappearance into some damp forgotten cell beneath the castle. You wander nearer the kitchens. Heat rushes outward in waves. Inside, cooks move among hanging pots and roasting spits while boys carry buckets of water from the courtyard well. The kitchen smells of onions, garlic, smoke, wet wool, and old grease soaked deep into wooden tables. Near the hearth, 2 women argue softly while plucking herbs. "I tell you the figs tasted bitter," one mutters. "Everything tastes bitter after too much wine." "No, bitter strange." The second woman crosses herself. "Do not speak of it." A cook nearby glances toward you and lowers his voice. The southern lord still breathes, though barely. His steward sent riders for another physician from the abbey. You ask whether the feast continued after the illness. The cook barks a tired laugh. Of course it continued. Nobles stop eating for almost nothing. There is truth in that. Medieval feasts are demonstrations of power as much as celebration. To halt a banquet entirely would announce fear to every watching guest. So the musicians keep playing while servants quietly remove a man who may or may not be dying behind the tapestries. You step aside as a young boy carries a silver basin past you with trembling hands. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the fear inside the keep comes from possible poison or from the possibility of accusation. Those are 2 very different dangers. Beyond the kitchens lies a narrow servants' corridor lit by tiny slit windows. Here the air cools again. You hear distant voices echoing through stone passages overhead. A maid carrying folded linen pauses beside you. "You should not wander," she whispers quickly. You ask whether the lord truly has enemies. She gives you a look suggesting you may also have asked whether winter contains snow. "He is a nobleman," she says simply. "Fair enough." She glances behind her before continuing in a lower voice. "Lady Isabel argued with him during supper. Everyone saw it. The lord's wife. The southern lord's sister." Now the story shifts shape again. She explains quietly while clutching the linen tighter against her chest. The southern guests arrived 3 days earlier to discuss marriage alliances and disputed lands along the river valleys. Tempers reportedly soured during negotiations. Last night's feast was meant to repair tensions. Instead, someone collapsed into his wine cup before the musicians finished their second song. The maid shivers. Some swear Lady Isabel keeps an Italian poisoner. You raise an eyebrow. "Do you believe that?" She hesitates. "I believe noble families smile too much during supper." That line stays with you. Outside the corridor window, pale daylight finally spreads across the town below. Smoke rises from hundreds of chimneys. Tiny figures move through the market square, setting up stalls beneath damp canvas awnings. Yet inside the keep, warmth and unease coil together beneath the rafters. A bell rings somewhere above. Servants pause instinctively. Time in medieval life belongs partly to bells. Monastery bells wake you, feed you, warn you, bury you, and eventually outlive you. The maid hurries away. You continue deeper into the hall where musicians now quietly pack away their instruments from the night before. One old harpist mutters to another while wrapping strings in cloth. "I saw the cupbearer taste the wine himself. And he lives?" The other musician shrugs. For now, a cold draught slips through the hall. At the high table sits one untouched goblet still half full of dark red wine. No servant approaches it, not even to clear the table. It rests there alone among the candle stubs and silver dishes, while pale morning light creeps slowly across the boards. And all through the keep, beneath the polite whispers and careful bows, suspicion begins moving quietly from person to person like smoke beneath the door. The untouched goblet remains on the high table long after the hall begins stirring into full daylight. You notice servants walking around it rather than near it, as though the wine itself might overhear them. Outside the narrow windows, the morning grows pale and cold. Frost clings to the rooftops beyond the town walls where the earlier rain has finally frozen into silver crusts along the gutters. Somewhere below in the yard, a mule brays with deep personal outrage at existence. You drift from the great hall into the quieter passages beyond the kitchens, following the scent of crushed herbs and warm wax. The keep changes character away from the feast chambers. Here the corridors narrow. The stone grows colder. Rushes soften your footsteps while thin draughts slip beneath oak doors bound with iron straps. Servants pass carrying bundles of linen and baskets of winter roots from the storehouse below. One woman balances onions, garlic, and turnips in her apron while muttering prayers beneath her breath. Medieval castles survive winter through endless movement of food, fuel, cloth, and rumour. Mostly rumour. At the end of a crooked stairway, you find the still room. The air inside feels entirely different from the rest of the keep. Warmth hangs heavy beneath the rafters. Herbs dry in thick bundles from ceiling beams: rosemary, sage, mint, fennel, lavender, wormwood. Their scents mingle into something earthy and sharp enough to sting your nose slightly. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling. Ceramic jars sealed with wax stand beside tiny cloth sacks tied with string. Mortars and pestles rest upon wooden tables stained green and brown from years of grinding roots and leaves into powders and pastes. A woman in a dark wool gown stands near the hearth crushing dried petals into a bowl. She glances up only briefly when you enter. Door stays shut, she says. The drafts spoil everything. You close it behind you. The woman's sleeves are rolled to the elbows. Her hands bear faint yellow-green stains from herbs and oils. Around her neck hangs a tiny silver charm shaped like St. Hildegard's cross. Common among healers and herbal women, no one can quite agree whether such charms protect medicine from evil or simply comfort those preparing it. You work for the household physician, you ask. She snorts softly. Physicians prefer Latin books and bleeding bowls. We keep people alive between their visits. Fair again. She gestures toward the hanging herbs. Most of this is harmless enough. Mint for the stomach, willow bark for pain, comfrey for wounds. Her fingers hover briefly over another bundle. And some things less harmless. You follow her gaze toward darker herbs tied separately near the rear wall. Henbane, monkshood, belladonna. Even their names sound unfriendly. The woman notices your attention. Every poison is also medicine if measured carefully, and every medicine becomes poison in foolish hands. The words settle into the warm room beside the crackling fire. She resumes grinding herbs while explaining how noble households store remedies through winter, dried leaves in cloth sacks, oils sealed in wax jars, syrups thickened with honey, powders hidden from damp. Certain mixtures are prepared only under supervision, especially those strong enough to stop pain or breathing. Outside, distant bells ring from the monastery again. The woman pauses briefly at the sound and crosses herself automatically. Bad business in the hall, she murmurs. You ask whether she believes the Southern Lord was poisoned. Her expression barely changes. I believe rich men eat too heavily and trust too little. Not exactly an answer. She reaches for a tiny locked chest resting upon the shelf behind her. Iron bands reinforce the corners. A key hangs hidden beneath her sleeve. Some things stay sealed, she says quietly. You hear footsteps in the corridor beyond. A younger servant girl enters carrying fresh water from the well. Her cheeks glow red from the cold outside. She stops immediately upon seeing you. This traveller's harmless, the herb woman says. The girl looks unconvinced. Medieval households treat strangers with the same caution normally reserved for suspicious mushrooms. She sets down the water bucket and begins sorting dried roots onto a cloth. Her hands move quickly and carefully. That one numbs the tongue, she says suddenly, pointing to pale, twisted roots. Cooks use tiny scrapings for toothaches. And too much. The older woman answers before she can. Too much, and your heart forgets its duties. The servant girl glances nervously toward the door. They say the southern lord's lips turned blue. Hush. They did. Hush anyway. Silence returns briefly except for the grinding of herbs. At last the older woman sighs and lowers her voice. There are stories from Italy. Powders hidden in figs. Oils brushed onto gloves. Poison beneath sealing wax on letters. She shrugs. Stories travel faster than truth. Some swear noble women carry poison rings with hidden compartments beneath the jewels. Others insist assassins soak prayer books in venom, so victims absorb death while turning pages. Even now, it's hard to tell whether such tales grow from reality or from the medieval love of making foreign lands sound dramatically sinister. The servant girl suddenly lifts a small bundle from the table. Not this one, she says quickly. The older woman turns sharply. Put that back. Inside the cloth rests a cluster of dried grey-green leaves. What is it, you ask? Foxglove. The older woman takes it carefully. Useful in careful doses, dangerous in careless ones. She places it high up on a shelf away from the others. Years ago, she says quietly, a steward's wife brewed it into wine for her husband after he beat her too often. The servant girl stares at the floor. What happened? The woman shrugs faintly. He died peacefully enough, which is more than can be said for most men like him. You hear another bell from deeper within the keep, faster this time. The servant girl stiffens. Physician summons. She hurries from the room immediately. The older woman watches her leave before speaking again. Noble poisonings are rarely simple murder. She adds dried herbs carefully into steaming water. Most often they are fear wearing nicer clothes. You stand quietly while steam rises between you. She explains how households begin suspecting everyone after illness strikes at table. Cooks blame servers. Servers blame stewards. Stewards blame rivals. Rivals blame foreigners. Foreigners blame physicians. Before long, even the dogs are watched suspiciously. And sometimes, she says, the poor soul simply ate spoiled oysters. That earns the faintest smile from you both. Outside the stillroom window, snow begins falling lightly over the town below. Tiny flakes drift through chimney smoke and settle upon the rooftops. The world beyond the keep grows softer, quieter. Inside, the older woman fills tiny ceramic bottles with dark liquid and seals them carefully with wax. You notice scratches upon the inside of the chest lid when she opens it again briefly. Small carved crosses repeated over and over. For protection, you ask. For memory, she replies. Memory of what? She hesitates. Of my predecessor. The fire cracks softly. She prepared remedies for Lord Bernat before he died 3 winters ago. The same lord mentioned at the inn. What became of her? The woman ties another bundle of herbs without looking up. Some swear she fled before dawn. She pauses. Others swear she never left the keep at all. The wind brushes faintly against the shutters while snow continues drifting across the waking town. And somewhere beyond these warm herb-scented walls, nobles gather again around guarded tables, each cup lifted carefully beneath the watchful eyes of servants who now trust almost nothing they carry. By evening, the snow has stopped, and the keep settles beneath a crust of frost that gleams pale beneath torchlight. The courtyard stones crack softly under boots and wagon wheels, while servants hurry through the cold, carrying firewood against their chests like precious cargo. Inside, warmth gathers again beneath the rafters of the great hall. Not comfortable warmth exactly. Medieval halls are ambitious about heat in the same way cats are ambitious about obeying commands. The fireplaces roar, the candles burn, the bodies crowd together, and somehow drafts still find your ankles anyway. Fresh rushes cover the floor now, sweetened with crushed lavender and mint. Long tables have been reset for another meal despite the unease hanging quietly over the household. Nobles do not cancel feasts easily. Power must appear steady, even while suspicion crawls beneath the benches like a rat no one wishes to acknowledge. You stand near one of the side pillars watching preparations unfold. Servants move carefully tonight, too carefully. Every dish receives double attention. Every cup changes hands under watchful eyes. A kitchen steward mutters prayers while inspecting wine seals beside the hearth. Nearby, a thin clerk scratches notes onto parchment recording which servants handled which platters. The atmosphere resembles a monastery mixed with a crime scene. At the high table sits Lord Edric himself, broad-shouldered beneath a fur-lined mantle, his face tired from too little sleep and too much politics. Beside him, several guests speak in hushed tones while musicians tune lutes near the fire. One chair remains empty. The southern lord still lies ill in his chambers upstairs. A rumour spreads through the hall that he survived the day but cannot yet stand. Another rumour claims he coughed black blood onto linen sheets. A third insists he recovered enough to accuse someone by name before collapsing again. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. You notice the cupbearer at last. He enters quietly through a side passage under guard. The man looks younger than expected, barely 30 perhaps, dark-haired, pale, and exhausted. His hands tremble faintly as he approaches the wine table near the dais. Conversation softens around him. The office of cupbearer sounds ceremonial to modern ears, but here it is intimate work, dangerous work. He oversees the Lord's wine, serves at table, and often sleeps near the private chambers in case refreshments are required during the night. He knows which guests drink heavily, which nobles quarrel after too much spiced wine, which servants sneak extra cups behind the kitchens. And now everyone watches him like a man carrying lit candles through a powder storehouse. A steward announces the meal. Servants begin bringing dishes from the kitchens below, roasted capon glazed with honey, smoked eel arranged upon wooden platters, thick pottage scented with leeks and parsley, trenchers of dark bread still steaming from the ovens. The smells drift warmly through the hall. Yet beneath them lingers something sharper tonight. Fear changes how people eat. You slip nearer the wine table where the cupbearer works beneath 2 armed guards. Large silver pitchers stand ready beside rows of goblets polished until they catch the candlelight. The cupbearer uncorks a fresh cask with practiced movements. Then comes the ritual. He fills a small silver cup first. Every eye nearby follows him. He drinks. Not much, or just enough. A swallow held briefly in the mouth before forcing it down. Then everyone waits. No one can quite agree how long nobles prefer tasters to survive before trusting the wine themselves. A few heartbeats. A quarter-hour long enough to notice symptoms. Medieval science remains wonderfully optimistic in places. The cupbearer stands silently while the hall breathes around him. At last the steward nods once. Only then does the serving begin. Goblets move carefully down the tables. Nobles accept them with studied calm while conversation resumes in fragments. A lady wrapped in blue velvet laughs too loudly at something unfunny. One knight smells his wine before drinking. Another quietly pours a little beneath the table for the dogs resting there. That catches your attention. A grey hunting hound laps eagerly at the spilled wine and survives without incident. Some swear noble households kept animals nearby specifically for this purpose. Dogs, birds, even monkeys in certain wealthy courts far to the south. If the creature survived supper, perhaps the lord might as well. Not exactly comforting for the creature, admittedly. Music rises from the harpist near the hearth. Soft strings drift through the smoky air while servants carry more dishes from below. Yet the tension never fully leaves the room. You notice small details. A noblewoman exchanging cups accidentally with her husband before both awkwardly switch back again. A servant crossing himself each time he approaches the wine table. A kitchen boy refusing to taste scraps from the platters tonight. The cupbearer continues working under relentless attention, every movement measured, every refill observed. At one point, Lord Edric beckons him closer. The entire nearby table falls silent immediately. The Lord speaks too quietly for you to hear, but the cupbearer bows low in response. His face grows paler than before. When he straightens, you glimpse sweat shining along his brow despite the cold hall. He retreats toward the wine casks again. A musician near you mutters softly, "Poor devil." You ask whether the cupbearer is suspected. "Everyone is suspected," the harpist replies. Fair again. He plucks idly at his strings while speaking. There was once a duke in Burgundy who trusted only one servant to pour his wine. Slept beside him for 15 years. Then one night the servant vanished before dawn, and the duke never woke. True. The musician shrugs. Depends who's telling it. The candles burn lower as supper stretches onward. Outside the narrow windows, snow clouds drift across the moon. Frost thickens along the glass edges while the hall grows warmer and louder with drink. Yet not drunk exactly. People sip cautiously tonight. Near the end of the meal, the physician finally appears descending from the upper chambers. Conversation hushes instantly. He's an elderly man wrapped in dark robes lined with squirrel fur. Around his belt hang little leather pouches, brass instruments, and a small pomander filled with aromatic herbs meant to ward away corruption in the air. Physicians in this age believe strongly in smells. Bad smells cause illness. Good smells prevent it. Which honestly explains quite a lot about medieval life. The physician approaches Lord Edric and bows. You cannot hear their words clearly, but you see the Lord's shoulders loosen slightly afterward. The southern noble still lives. Relief moves quietly through the hall like warmer air spreading from a hearth. Not complete relief, though, because survival creates its own problems. If the man recovers fully, he may accuse someone. If he dies later, suspicion deepens. And if no cause is ever proven, the household may spend years glancing nervously at cups during every future feast. The cupbearer finally steps back from the wine table after the last course is served. His hands still shake faintly. One of the guards beside him murmurs something low enough to draw the first exhausted smile you've seen from the man all evening. Then a serving girl slips on the rushes nearby. A silver goblet crashes loudly onto the floor. Wine splashes across the stones. The entire hall freezes. For one long moment nobody moves at all. The poor girl looks ready to faint dead away into the puddle herself. Then Lord Edric begins laughing. A rough, tired laugh, but real enough. Others join carefully after him. The tension cracks at last, if only slightly. Servants rush forward to clean the spill while conversation slowly resumes beneath the rafters once more. But later, As you leave the hall and hear the distant monastery bells echoing through the frozen night, you notice the spilled wine remains dark upon the rushes where the dogs still refuse to sniff it. Long after the feast thins into weary conversation and drifting music, the keep remains awake. You feel it in the corridors. Servants still hurry between chambers carrying heated stones wrapped in cloth for cold beds. Guards pace the walls beneath the moonlight. Somewhere below, kitchen boys scrape trenches clean while muttering complaints about nobles who apparently believe roasted eel should appear by magic. The bells from the abbey beyond the river mark another late hour. You follow their distant sound through the quieter passages of the keep, where candlelight burns low inside wall niches and draughts wander freely beneath old doors. The stones here remember centuries of winter. Moisture beads faintly along the mortar. Your footsteps soften against scattered rushes mixed with straw and crushed herbs. At the far end of a narrow gallery, a servant directs you toward the guest quarters reserved for travellers and lesser clergy. The monks are still awake, he whispers, copying prayers for the southern lord. Or perhaps copying gossip. Medieval monasteries occasionally manage both at once. The abbey men have been granted temporary lodging inside the keep while the household physician consults them. Monks carry strange authority in such moments. They preserve medical texts, mix remedies, tend herb gardens, and pray over the dying. In uncertain times, nobles prefer to keep both science and heaven close at hand. You enter a chamber warmed by a small brazier. 3 monks sit around a heavy oak table beneath wavering candlelight. Parchments cover nearly every surface, ink pots, sharpened quills, and tiny knives for scraping mistakes lie scattered among the pages. The room smells of vellum, smoke, beeswax, and damp wool drying near the fire. One monk snores quietly in the corner with his cheek resting directly upon an unfinished manuscript. The others appear too tired to object. An older monk looks up as you enter. His sleeves are stained black at the cuffs from years of copying ink onto parchment. Deep lines crease his face. Around his neck hangs a small reliquary box said to contain splinters from some saint's burial shrine, though no one seems entirely certain which saint anymore. That happens surprisingly often. "You are the traveller from the hall," he says softly. You nod. He gestures toward a stool near the brazier. "Warm yourself. The keep leaks cold through every stone." You sit gratefully. Nearby, another monk carefully grinds herbs with a mortar while reading from a Latin text. His lips move silently over the words. Every few moments he squints closer to the page as though personally offended by medieval handwriting, which honestly is understandable. The older monk introduces himself as Brother Aldwyn. He pours warmed ale into a clay cup for you before speaking again. The household fears poison. You do not. Brother Aldwyn folds his hands slowly. Fear arrives long before certainty. The younger monk at the table snorts faintly without looking up from his text, and certainty rarely arrives at all. Candles flicker softly across the manuscript spread before them. You glimpse illustrations of herbs, veins, stars, and oddly shaped organs copied from older texts whose original authors likely died generations earlier. No one can quite agree how much medieval physicians truly understand about poison. Some blame corrupted humours, others suspect mineral vapours, spoiled food, or divine punishment. A few scholars argue poison works differently depending on planetary alignment, which feels ambitious even by medieval standards. Brother Aldwyn notices your attention lingering on one manuscript. "Treatise from Salerno," he explains. "Italian physicians write extensively on toxic substances." The younger monk mutters, "They also write extensively on charging noblemen too much for treatment." Brother Aldwyn ignores him with visible practice. You ask whether poisons truly exist that leave no trace. The monks exchange glances. At last the older one answers carefully. There are plants that weaken the heart, powders that disturb the stomach, metals that sicken slowly over months. He pauses, and there are frightened households eager to blame poison for every unexplained illness. The younger monk finally looks up from his pages. He cannot be much older than 25. His fingers bear fresh ink stains and tiny cuts from parchment knives. My old abbot believed half of all poisonings were simply bad oysters, he says. Brother Aldwin sighs. Brother Cuthbert lacks reverence for tragedy. Brother Cuthbert lacks faith in oysters. A faint smile briefly touches the older monk's face despite himself. The wind rattles softly against the shutters. Brother Cuthbert rises and crosses toward a shelf where several small jars stand sealed with wax. He lifts one carefully. "See this?" he asks. Inside rests a pale grey powder. "Ground pearl," he explains. Some nobles stir it into wine, believing it protects against venom. Does it? Mostly it protects pearl merchants. You nearly laugh into your cup. The monks continue sorting through their texts while the brazier crackles warmly beside you. Outside, the bells sound once more through the frosted darkness. Brother Aldwin eventually lowers his voice. There are older stories too. Kings employing poisoners hidden among cooks. Rival bishops slipping powders into sacramental wine. Entire households destroyed by suspicion alone. He turns one parchment toward you. Upon it is drawn a strange branching plant with black berries. "Belladonna," he says, "beautiful and deadly." Brother Cuthbert adds, "Though to hear noble courts speak of it, you would think every second widow keeps it hidden beneath her bed." "Some probably do," the older monk murmurs. The younger monk resumes grinding herbs. No one ever suspects plain old greed first. Only mysterious poison. A draught slips beneath the door, then, carrying colder air into the room. Moments later comes hurried knocking. A servant enters pale-faced and breathless. "The southern lord worsens again," he whispers. The monks rise immediately. Brother Aldwin gathers pouches, cloths, and one heavy medical text while Brother Cuthbert snatches candles from the table. Their exhaustion disappears beneath practiced urgency. You follow them through twisting corridors deeper into the keep. The upper chambers feel quieter than the feast hall below. Tapestries hang thick along the walls to block winter draughts. Guards stand outside carved oak doors with rigid expressions. Inside the sick room, heat presses heavily against your face. Braziers glow red near the bed. Candles crowd every surface. The air smells sharply of vinegar, rosemary, sweat, and something metallic beneath it all. The southern lord lies propped among blankets, pale and breathing unevenly. His sister, Lady Isabel, sits nearby wrapped in dark velvet with one gloved hand clenched tightly around a prayer rope. She looks exhausted rather than dramatic, which somehow feels more believable. The household physician murmurs instructions while servants change cloth soaked in herbal water. Nearby rests a silver bowl stained dark from earlier bleeding. Brother Aldwin approaches carefully. The sick man's lips move faintly, though you cannot hear the words. Lady Isabel notices the monks and rises quickly. Candlelight catches the gold embroidery along her sleeves. "Will he survive the night?" she asks. No one answers immediately. Even now, it's hard to tell whether silence in medieval castles means uncertainty, politeness, or fear of being blamed later. Brother Cuthbert prepares a bitter-smelling mixture while the physician checks the patient's pulse again. Outside the narrow windows, frost thickens across the glass. The southern lord suddenly grips Brother Aldwin's wrist weakly. His voice emerges little more than breath. "The cup." The room stills. Lady Isabel leans forward instantly, What cup? But the man's eyes drift shut again before another word comes. Only the crackling braziers disturb the silence afterward. Somewhere far below in the keep, a dog begins barking into the cold winter night. The barking below the keep continues for some time after the sick man falls silent again. It echoes upward through the stone passages in lonely bursts, drifting between the bells from the distant abbey and the restless murmur of servants changing watch near the doors. No one in the chamber speaks much after that unfinished warning. The cup. Two small words now wander through the keep like ghosts looking for somewhere to settle. You leave the sick room with the monks just before dawn begins softening the eastern sky. Frost whitens the arrow slits and gathers along the iron hinges of the doors. In the lower corridors, servants already move through the half-light carrying water buckets from the well yard below. Medieval castles begin work absurdly early, mostly because winter daylight disappears quickly and candles cost money. Brother Cuthbert walks beside you while rubbing sleep from his eyes. "If I ever become a nobleman," he mutters, "I intend to fall ill quietly and at sensible hours." Brother Aldwyn gives him a weary look. "You once fainted during Lent because you forgot to eat." A separate issue. The monks disappear toward the chapel to prepare morning prayers while you continue down into the waking town beneath the keep. The market square has transformed overnight. Canvas awnings rise beneath pale morning clouds. Merchants hammer stakes into frozen ground while ox carts creak through muddy ruts carrying barrels, firewood, and sacks of winter grain. Smoke drifts low between the timber buildings. Somewhere nearby, someone burns rosemary against the cold air. The town smells alive again. Fresh bread, wet wool, wood smoke, fish brine, horse sweat, hot onions sizzling in grease, and beneath all of it, quiet gossip. You hear fragments everywhere. The southern lord spoke before dawn. They say poison blackened the silver cup. A serving boy vanished. Lady Isabel hired an Italian physician years ago. Cupbearers still under guard. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but disagreement rarely slows gossip in medieval towns. If anything, it improves performance. You drift among the market stalls while traders arrange their wares beneath fluttering banners. An old spice merchant pours saffron threads carefully into tiny scales. Nearby, a woman sells beeswax candles shaped like saints while muttering blessings over each purchase. At the edge of the square stands a row of apothecaries beneath painted wooden signs showing herbs, moons, and curious beasts. One stall draws particular attention. Bundles of dried plants hang overhead beside little glass bottles glowing amber in the pale light. Small carved charms dangle from cords beside jars of powders and oils. A grey-haired woman wrapped in layers of wool tends the stall while customers crowd near her table. You approach slowly. The woman's eyes sharpen immediately, looking for healing or revenge. You blink once. She shrugs. Most people come for one or the other. Fair enough. Her table holds strange things. Dried elderberries, poppy resin sealed in wax, crushed mint, tiny packets of salt mixed with ground herbs, a carved hare's foot, little saint medals blackened by age. Some swear carrying rowan wood protects travellers from poisoning. Others insist garlic hung above the bed reveals hidden enemies. Medieval people love combining medicine, superstition, and general anxiety into one convenient package. The woman notices your interest in the charms. "Those are for fear," she says. "Do they work?" "Sometimes people sleep better after buying them." She pauses, which is close enough. A nervous young servant from the keep stands nearby, clutching a small purse tightly. "I need something for stomach sickness," he whispers. The woman studies him carefully. For who? The servant hesitates too long. The apothecary sighs softly. Never mind. Everyone in town already knows. She measures herbs into folded parchment with practiced hands. Mint, fennel, a little ginger if your lord can afford it. He can. Then he should also afford prayers. The servant leaves quickly with the packet hidden inside his cloak. You ask whether she believes the southern noble was poisoned. The woman snorts. I believe nobles spend their lives making enemies and then act surprised when supper becomes stressful. A nearby customer laughs into his scarf. She continues arranging jars while speaking in a lower tone. Real poisoners are rare, but fear of poison. She gestures toward the crowded square. That sells every winter. You notice tiny packets labelled against corruption, evil vapours, cursed glances, and bad blood. Business appears excellent. At another stall, a relic seller waves pilgrims closer to inspect tiny bone fragments sealed inside glass pendants. One particularly enthusiastic merchant claims a saint's tooth once protected an entire duke from poisoned wine. No one can quite agree whether the tooth belonged to the saint or possibly a sheep. Still, several buyers seem interested. The square grows busier as morning advances. Bells ring from the abbey tower while snowmelt drips steadily from rooftops. A troupe of travelling musicians sets up near the fountain despite the cold, their instruments wrapped in patched cloth. Then shouting erupts near the well. Heads turn instantly. 2 guards from the keep drag a kitchen servant through the crowd by the arm. The boy cannot be more than 16. His face has gone pale with panic. I didn't do anything. He keeps insisting. Which, historically speaking, is not always reassuring. The crowd parts around them. You follow at a careful distance as the guards pull the boy toward the keep road. A cluster of townsfolk trails behind, whispering excitedly. What did he do? Stole spices, maybe? No, poison. Definitely poison. The story grows confidently with every 10 steps. At the gatehouse, the guards pause while a steward questions the trembling servant beneath the archway. You remain near enough to hear fragments. Handled the figs. Only carried the tray. Cupbearer named him. The boy begins crying outright. A hard-faced steward finally waves the guards onward. Lock him below until questioned again. The servant disappears through a narrow side door beneath the keep. And just like that, suspicion has found its first easy target. Brother Cuthbert appears unexpectedly beside you carrying a sack of herbs from the market. That was quick, he murmurs. You ask whether he believes the boy guilty. The monk watches the closed door thoughtfully. I believe frightened households prefer simple answers. He adjusts the sack beneath his arm, and frightened nobles especially prefer guilty servants. Together you begin climbing the road back toward the keep. Smoke rises from chimneys into the pale winter sky while crows gather along the walls above. Behind you, the market continues buzzing with gossip and trade as though life itself refuses to pause for mystery. Halfway up the hill, Brother Cuthbert stops beside a roadside shrine tucked beneath a bare oak tree. Tiny candles flicker before a painted saint darkened by years of smoke and weather. The monk places one small coin beside the shrine. For the sick lord, you ask? For the kitchen boy, he replies quietly. The wind moves softly through the branches overhead. Far below, the market bells continue ringing while the keep looms above the town, cold and watchful against the whitening sky. And somewhere beneath its stone floors, a frightened servant waits alone in darkness while noblemen upstairs continue wondering which hand last touched the poisoned cup. Snow falls again during the night. Not heavily this time, just enough to soften the rooftops and quiet the roads beneath the keep. By morning, the town seems wrapped in wool. Chimney smoke drifts slowly upward through pale grey skies, while bells from the abbey roll across the frosted valley in long, sleepy waves. Inside the castle, however, very little feels soft. The household moves carefully now, like people crossing ice that may crack beneath them at any moment. Servants whisper in corners, guards linger outside doors they once ignored. Even the dogs seem strangely subdued, curled beside hearths with their noses tucked beneath their tails. You pass through the lower hall where kitchen boys carry sacks of winter apples from the storehouses below. One of them glances nervously toward the cellar stairs where the arrested servant remains confined. No one mentions him directly anymore. That is another medieval habit. Once fear settles into a household, people begin speaking around things instead of at them. You continue upward through winding staircases toward the private chambers reserved for noble guests. Thick tapestries line the walls here, trapping warmth and muffling footsteps. Candles burn inside polished iron sconces. The air smells faintly of rose oil and beeswax. A maid carrying folded linen nearly collides with you before stopping abruptly. "The lady's chamber is closed," she whispers. You had not asked, which somehow makes the statement more interesting. The maid glances both ways along the corridor before lowering her voice further. Too many people wandering today already. The lady, Lady Isabel, the southern noble's sister, the same woman rumoured to have quarrelled during the feast. You ask whether she truly keeps foreign poisoners and hidden powders as the servants claim. The maid rolls her eyes so hard they nearly qualify as prayer. Servants say every noblewoman with perfume and books is secretly poisoning somebody. Again, fair. Still, she hesitates before continuing. She does keep her own still room. Now that catches your attention. Not unusual exactly. Noblewomen often oversee medicines, perfumes, cosmetics, and household remedies. Yet after recent events, even innocent habits begin casting longer shadows. The maid eventually slips away down the corridor while you remain near the carved oak doors of Lady Isabel's apartments. Voices drift faintly from inside. A moment later the doors open. Warm scented air spills outward. Lady Isabel herself steps into the corridor wearing a dark green gown lined with pale fur. Gold thread glimmers softly at her sleeves and collar. Her expression remains composed, though exhaustion shadows her eyes from too many sleepless nights. Behind her, candlelight flickers across rich tapestries and polished wooden furniture. She notices you immediately. "You are not one of my brother's guards," she says calmly. "No, my lady, nor a servant." "No. Interesting." Her voice carries neither warmth nor hostility, merely careful observation, the sort practiced by people who survive noble courts. She studies you briefly before stepping aside. "Well then," she says, "you may as well come in since half the castle already suspects me of murder anyway." Inside, her chambers feel entirely unlike the rough halls below. Braziers glow warmly beside painted screens. Thick rugs soften the floor instead of simple rushes. Small glass bottles stand arranged upon carved shelves beside ivory combs, prayer books, and silver mirrors imported from Venice. The air smells of lavender, rosemary, and faint citrus oils rare enough in winter to suggest serious wealth. No one can quite agree whether noble chambers are luxurious or simply very elaborate attempts to avoid freezing indoors. Lady Isabel pours warmed wine into delicate cups before motioning you toward a cushioned chair near the fire. On a nearby table rests an open manuscript filled with illustrations of herbs and flowers. Beside it sits a little brass mortar stained green from recent use. "You see," she says dryly, instantly suspicious. You glance toward the herbs. Medicines. Mostly perfumes. She lifts a tiny glass vial. Rosemary oil, violet water, clove extract. She pauses. And yes, remedies for headaches and winter coughs before anyone faints dramatically. A faint smile touches her mouth for the first time. The chamber contains other curiosities too. Silk gloves embroidered with tiny silver stars, pomanders filled with scented resins, little carved boxes holding dried petals and powders. A tiny lapdog sleeps beside the hearth, wearing a ribbon at its neck and displaying absolutely no awareness of political intrigue whatsoever. Probably the wisest creature in the castle. Lady Isabel notices your attention lingering on the shelves. "My mother taught me herb lore," she says quietly. "Most noble women learn some measure of it. Men call it harmless housekeeping until someone falls ill." Outside the narrow windows, snow drifts softly against the glass. You ask whether she argued with her brother during the feast. Her eyes narrow slightly. "Of course we argued. Noble families argue the way monasteries ring bells." She sips her wine slowly, constantly and with great seriousness. She rises and crosses toward the fire. "My brother wished to marry my nephew into Lord Edric's line. I opposed it." "Why?" "Because alliances built on fear tend to age poorly. The flames crackle softly between you." Lady Isabel studies the fire for a long moment before speaking again. "When my father died, half the court whispered poison." Her fingers tightened faintly around the cup. "When my husband died, they whispered it again." "You believe neither was murdered." "I believe powerful men die often, and people prefer interesting explanations." She turns back toward you. "Though occasionally," she adds softly, "interesting explanations are true." The words linger heavily in the warm chamber. A servant enters carrying folded cloth steeped in hot water for the sick room upstairs. She bows quickly before hurrying out again. You notice Lady Isabel watching the servant leave. "They fear me," she says. "Do they?" "They fear what they imagine I know." She moves toward a carved cabinet near the bed and unlocks it with a tiny iron key worn at her waist. Inside stand more jars. Dried herbs carefully wrapped in linen, glass bottles of oils, small ceramic containers sealed with wax. One jar contains black powder. You raise an eyebrow. "Ground charcoal," she says immediately, "for the stomach, though I admit it looks wonderfully sinister." Another holds tiny pale seeds. "Poppy," and useful. For sleep. She pauses, and sometimes for escaping pain. Her voice softens at that. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Lady Isabel speaks as healer, grieving sister, or possible conspirator. Perhaps medieval noblewomen learned to survive by becoming all three at once. The little lapdog suddenly wanders toward the cabinet and begins sniffing at one particular bottle before sneezing violently. Lady Isabel laughs quietly. "There, proof my perfumes are deadly." The moment briefly breaks the tension. Then footsteps echo sharply beyond the chamber doors. A guard appears breathless in the corridor outside. "My lady," he says, "the Southern Lord has awakened again." Her expression changes instantly. "And he is asking for you." The warmth seems to leave the room at once. Lady Isabel closes the cabinet carefully and fastens the iron key back at her waist. As she moves toward the door, she pauses beside the sleeping lapdog and gently scratches behind its ears. "A strange thing about poison," she says quietly without looking at you. "It never truly sickens only one person." Then she disappears into the corridor while snow continues falling softly beyond the windows and the scented chamber grows still around the dying fire. The snow stops before dawn, leaving the forest roads beyond the town glazed white beneath a pale winter sky. Frost clings to the bare hedgerows. Thin ice gathers along the edges of streams winding through the valley below the keep. By morning, word spreads that another physician has been summoned from a priory several miles north through the forest. Not because the Southern Lord worsened overnight exactly, but because nobody inside the castle fully trusts the first physician anymore. That is the trouble with suspected poison. It does not merely infect the body, it seeps into conversations, glances, loyalties, and locked doors until every person begins weighing everyone else's motives like merchants judging spoiled grain. You volunteer quietly to accompany the riders fetching the northern healer, mostly because the keep itself has begun feeling too warm with suspicion. A stable boy saddles the horses beneath a roof dripping with thawing snow. Steam rises from their flanks into the cold air, while ravens hop along the walls overhead. One guard mutters that ravens gather wherever death waits nearby. Another replies that ravens gather wherever people leave scraps of food lying around. Both explanations seem plausible. The small party leaves through the eastern gate shortly after sunrise. Hooves crunch over frozen mud, while your breath hangs white before your face. Behind you, the keep slowly disappears into drifting mist and chimney smoke. The forest road winds between bare oaks and dark firs heavy with snow. Frozen branches creak softly overhead whenever the wind stirs them. Occasionally you pass roadside shrines half buried beneath frost, where travellers have left tiny offerings, coins, ribbons, little wax saints darkened by weather. One of the guards touches 2 fingers to his chest each time you pass them. Protection, you ask. Habit, he replies, which may describe half of medieval superstition. The older rider leading your group introduces himself as Garin, a broad-faced man with frost already gathering in his beard. He speaks rarely at first, concentrating on the slippery road ahead. Eventually he gestures toward clusters of winter plants pushing stubbornly through the snow near the roadside ditch. See those blackberries, he says. Don't touch them. You recognize the plant vaguely from the still room. Deadly. Maybe. Garin shrugs inside his heavy cloak. Or maybe they only make your stomach regret its choices. Helpful. The road climbs deeper into the forest. Sunlight filters weakly through the branches, pale as watered milk. Somewhere in the distance comes the tapping of a woodpecker. Otherwise the world remains quiet except for hooves and harness creaks. Garin eventually speaks again. My grandmother swore poisoners learned from shepherds. How so? Sheep know every dangerous route in these woods. Farmers too. He points toward a cluster of pale winter stalks. Monkshood grows there come spring. Pretty flowers. Kill a man dead if prepared correctly. One younger rider crosses himself immediately. No one can quite agree whether peasants truly know which plants kill, Garin continues, or whether they simply enjoy frightening noblemen. The younger guard mutters, both probably. You pass an abandoned charcoal burner's hut leaning sideways beneath snow-covered branches. Smoke no longer rises from its chimney. A little further on, strips of cloth flutter from a tree beside the road. Offerings. Some swear forest spirits linger where travellers die unexpectedly. Others leave charms merely because lonely winter roads make everyone a little more willing to bargain with invisible things. The younger guard spits into the snow. Bad place, he murmurs. Garin nods toward the woods. 3 merchants vanished here 2 winters back. Bandits. Maybe. That word again. Maybe. The medieval world survives comfortably on uncertainty. At midday, you stop beside a frozen stream where the horses drink from broken patches of water beneath the ice. The riders eat coarse bread, smoked fish, and hard cheese while standing near a small fire built against the wind. Cold smoke drifts through the trees. Garin unwraps a bundle of dried herbs from his saddlebag and tosses a few leaves into the flames. Sharp scent rises immediately. Juniper, he explains, keeps sickness away. Does it? He shrugs. Smells cleaner than the horses. Again, fair. One of the younger riders quietly admits his mother carries dried rowan berries sewn into her sleeves to ward off poison. Another swears monks in the south keep emerald dust beneath their tongues during royal banquets. Emerald dust, Garin grunts. If jewels prevented murder, kings would live forever. The men laugh softly around the fire. Yet even here, miles from the keep, the subject returns constantly. Poison. Fear follows it everywhere now. When the meal ends, you continue northward through denser forest where snow muffles every sound. Your horse's breath rises in slow white clouds. Tiny icicles hang from low branches, glittering faintly in the afternoon light. Then Garin raises one gloved hand sharply. The riders stop. Ahead, beside the road, stands an old woman gathering roots from beneath the snow with a hooked stick. A basket hangs from her arm filled with winter herbs wrapped carefully in cloth. She looks up slowly as the riders approach. Most medieval people regard solitary women in forests with immediate suspicion, especially if they know plants, which honestly must become exhausting for the women involved. The old woman squints at the guards. "You ride hard for healers," she says before anyone speaks. Garin stiffens slightly. "How do you know that?" She taps her nose. Castlemen smell nervous this week. The younger guards glance uneasily at one another. The woman kneels again beside the frozen ground, digging gently at roots beneath the snow. "You seek remedies," she continues calmly, "but roots cannot mend frightened hearts." One rider mutters something about witches beneath his breath. The old woman hears him anyway. "Witches charge better rates," she replies without looking up. You nearly smile. Garin asks whether she knows anything of poisons growing nearby. Everything poisons eventually. She lifts a pale root from the earth. Too much water kills. Too much wine kills faster. She brushes dirt from the root slowly. But yes, these woods grow dangerous things. Her eyes drift toward you briefly. Most poisoners are patient people. That is what frightens nobles most. The wind stirs softly through the trees. The old woman suddenly reaches into her basket and offers Garin a tiny pouch tied with the red thread. "For the sick man." "What is it?" "Willow bark, mint, honey root. Medicine. If brewed correctly." Garin accepts it carefully. And if brewed incorrectly, one rider asks nervously. The woman smiles faintly. Then your journey becomes much shorter. Silence settles over the snowy road. At last Garin nods politely and signals the riders onward. As you continue through the forest, the old woman's figure slowly disappears among the pale trees behind you. No one speaks for several minutes afterward. Then the younger guard finally mutters, "Definitely a witch." Garin sighs deeply into his scarf. "No," he says, "just old." The road bends northward through the whitening woods while twilight slowly gathers between the branches. And somewhere behind you, beyond the frozen fields and forest shrines, the keep still waits upon its hill with warm fires glowing behind narrow windows and frightened nobles wondering whether the deadliest things in the world arrive hidden in cups, roots, or simply in the quiet patience of human hands. By the time you return to the keep 2 days later, the snow has begun melting from the rooftops in long dripping lines beneath a weak afternoon sun. The roads are worse now than before the freeze. Thick brown mud clings to boots, wagon wheels, and horse hooves with almost personal determination. The northern physician rides with your party beneath a hooded cloak lined in dark fur. His name is Master Odo, though everyone seems to call him the prior's doctor instead, as though his true identity belongs more to the abbey than himself. He speaks little during the journey back. Mostly he watches. The trees, the riders, the pouch of herbs given by the old forest woman, even the sky. Physicians in this age often behave as though illness might leap out from scenery if not properly monitored. The keep appears through the mist late in the day, its walls streaked dark with thawing water, Smoke rises heavily from the chimneys. Bells ring somewhere inside the chapel tower as guards admit your party through the gatehouse. News waits immediately. The kitchen servant still sits imprisoned below the keep. The southern lord survives, though barely eats. And now Lord Edric has called a manor court. Not an official royal trial exactly, more a gathering of household officers, stewards, clergy, and sworn witnesses meant to untangle accusations before they grow dangerous enough to attract outside authorities. In medieval life, people prefer solving problems privately whenever possible, especially problems involving nobles and suspicious cups. The lower hall fills steadily as evening approaches. Villagers from nearby estates crowd near the rear walls hoping to overhear scandal. Servants cluster beside the doors whispering nervously. A pair of monks prepare writing desks near the front so testimony can be recorded in careful Latin script no one else present fully understands. You notice Brother Cuthbert among them looking profoundly unconvinced by the entire process. The hall itself feels colder than usual despite roaring fires. Moisture drips occasionally from the high beams overhead, where melting snow has seeped through ancient cracks in the roof. At the centre stands a long oak table. Upon it rests the silver goblet, the same one left untouched after the feast. Even now, no servant willingly touches it bare-handed. Master Odo approaches the table slowly while the assembled household watches. He removes thin leather gloves and studies the cup beneath candlelight. No one can quite agree whether physicians in moments like this rely more upon learning or dramatic timing. He sniffs the rim carefully, then dips one finger into the dark stain remaining at the bottom. Several nearby servants visibly recoil. Master Odo tastes the faintest trace upon his tongue. The room collectively stops breathing. After a long pause, he shrugs. "Wine," he says. The tension collapses slightly into awkward murmuring. Brother Cuthbert coughs suspiciously into his sleeve. You suspect he may be hiding laughter. Lord Edric enters soon after, flanked by guards and household officers. He looks more exhausted than angry now. His beard remains untrimmed from sleepless days. Beside him walks Lady Isabel dressed plainly in dark wool rather than jewelled finery. The imprisoned kitchen boy is brought forward next. Chains rattle softly at his wrists as guards escort him to the centre of the hall. He looks smaller somehow than before, pale, hollow-eyed, terrified. The steward begins questioning him before the assembled court. "Did you prepare the fig served at the high table?" "Yes, master." "Did anyone instruct you to alter them?" "No, master." "Did you touch the wine cups?" "No." "Did you speak privately with the cupbearer?" The boy hesitates. A little. Murmurs ripple through the hall instantly. The steward presses harder. About what? The servant swallows visibly. About kitchen matters. Which matters? The poor boy finally blurts, "He owed me 2 pennies from dice." Honestly, it is almost disappointing how ordinary some medieval scandals turn out to be. Yet suspicion clings stubbornly anyway. Several witnesses speak afterward. A serving girl claims the figs smelled bitter. A steward insists the southern lord drank heavily before supper even began. One knight swears he saw Lady Isabel exchange words angrily with her brother. Another says they merely discussed land taxes. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Master Odo listens silently throughout while rubbing his fingers together near the fire for warmth. At one point, an elderly cook waddles forward to testify carrying a ladle, as though it grants legal authority. "Nobody poisoned anybody in my kitchen," he announces immediately. The steward sighs deeply. That is not technically testimony. It should be. The cook glares around the hall. You serve rich folk 30 years and one noble gets stomach pains. Suddenly everybody looks at the soup. A few servants near the back nod with heartfelt agreement. Lord Edric rubs his temples tiredly. Brother Cuthbert quietly mutters near you, "I like him." The cook continues indignantly, "Do you know how many geese I've roasted without murder? Hundreds." "Thank you," the steward interrupts. "No appreciation for consistency around here." He stomps back toward the kitchen, still muttering about geese. The mood lightens briefly. Only briefly. Because then the cupbearer is brought forward. He walks without chains but under heavy guard. His face appears gaunter than before. Dark circles shadow his eyes from sleepless nights. Lord Edric studies him carefully. "You tasted the wine first." "Yes, my lord." "And suffered no illness?" "No, my lord." "Then how do you explain the southern lord's condition?" Silence stretches. At last the cupbearer answers quietly, "I cannot." The steward steps closer. "The kitchen boy claims you argued before supper." "About dice." "Only dice." The cupbearer hesitates too long. The hall stills again. Finally he lowers his eyes. "He accused me of stealing silver cups last month." Murmurs ripple through the room. Lord Edric's expression darkens slightly. "Did you—" "No, my lord." Brother Cuthbert whispers beside you. "Ah, medieval justice, always drifting sideways." Master Odo finally speaks for the first time since entering the hall. "Describe the symptoms precisely." Everyone turns toward him. The cupbearer obeys shakily, sweating, vomiting, weak pulse, discoloured lips, stomach pain. The physician listens without expression. Then he asks something unexpected. "What else did the southern lord consume that evening?" Confused silence follows. The steward blinks. "The feast meal." "All of it." "No, naturally not." Master Odo nods slowly toward the scribes. "Then perhaps we should stop chasing cups alone." The room quiets. Even now, it is hard to tell whether relief or fresh fear moves through the gathered household at that suggestion. Because if the poison did not come through wine, then it could have arrived through nearly anything. Figs, sauce, sweetmeats, herbal tonic, salt, oil, or medicine itself. The candles burn lower as the questioning continues deep into evening. Wax pools across the tables. Smoke curls lazily toward the rafters overhead. Outside, darkness settles once more across the town below the keep. Dogs bark in distant alleys. Bells echo faintly from the abbey. And inside the hall, suspicion slowly widens like cracks spreading through ice beneath too many uncertain feet. The manor court drags late into the night before Lord Edric finally dismisses the gathering. No verdict comes, no confession, only deeper uncertainty. Servants retreat through the corridors carrying guttering candles while nobles disappear into private chambers behind thick oak doors. The kitchen boy returns to his cell beneath the keep. The cupbearer vanishes under guard once more. Snowmelt drips steadily from the outer walls into the darkness below. And still the southern lord remains alive upstairs. Barely. You leave the great hall feeling heavy with smoke, candle wax and unanswered questions. The castle itself seems restless tonight. Draughts creep through passages like unseen listeners. Every distant footstep echoes too sharply. Somewhere near midnight, Brother Cuthbert finds you near the lower stairwell leading toward the storage vaults. "The physician wants charcoal," he mutters. "Apparently sickness now requires digging through half the castle." He gestures for you to follow. Together you descend beneath the keep. The air grows colder with every step. Damp stone replaces the warmer smells of kitchens and hearth smoke above. Tiny candles flicker weakly in wall niches, their flames bending whenever hidden draughts slip through cracks in the ancient masonry. Below the cellars lies another level few guests ever see. Workrooms. Storage chambers. old passages half forgotten by newer generations. Brother Cuthbert leads you through twisting corridors where barrels of ale stand stacked beside sacks of grain and salted fish. Rats scurry somewhere beyond the walls with great confidence and no visible fear of consequences. At the far end of one passage rests a narrow iron-bound door. Cuthbert pauses there. The alchemist works below. You raise an eyebrow. There's an alchemist in the keep. There's always an alchemist somewhere near nobles. The monk sighs, usually where explosions would cause the most inconvenience. Fair again. He pushes open the door. Warm, strange-smelling air drifts upward from the chamber beyond. You descend into a vaulted room lit by oil lamps and a low greenish fire burning beneath iron stands. Shelves crowd the walls holding jars of powders, minerals, dried plants, animal bones, bits of metal, and glass vessels connected by twisting tubes. The place resembles a chapel designed by deeply suspicious crows. At the centre bends a thin man wrapped in patched robes stained with soot and ash. His grey hair points in several directions at once. Tiny spectacles balance precariously upon his nose while he heats some dark substance inside a copper dish. He does not look up immediately. "Leave the charcoal by the furnace," he mutters. Brother Cuthbert clears his throat. "Master Severin, we require it for the physician." The alchemist sniffs irritably. Everyone requires things for physicians after supper goes poorly. At last he notices you. A traveller. He squints. Excellent. Someone else to blame when something catches fire. The chamber hums softly with bubbling liquids and crackling coals. Strange shadows ripple along the ceiling overhead. No one can quite agree what alchemists truly accomplish. Some seek medicines. Others claim to transform metals into gold. A few spend decades producing smoke, unpleasant smells, and concern among sensible neighbours. Master Severin gestures vaguely around the room. Careful near the blue jars, or the red ones. Honestly, just avoid touching anything. Brother Cuthbert begins gathering charcoal from a storage bin while the alchemist returns to his work. You notice symbols scratched into the wooden tables. Stars, circles, little diagrams marked in Latin. Nearby stands a half-finished drawing of the human body with arrows pointing toward organs of questionable accuracy. Master Severin catches you staring. "The liver is important," he says defensively. "I never said otherwise." "Good." He stirs the heating dish thoughtfully. Most physicians forget the liver entirely. Then people die and everyone acts surprised. A faint metallic smell drifts through the chamber. You ask whether he has been consulted about the suspected poisoning. The alchemist gives a dry laugh. Consulted certainly, or trusted never. He lifts a tiny vial toward the lamplight. Inside swirls dark reddish liquid. Nobles love alchemists until someone collapses at table. Brother Cuthbert mutters, "To be fair, your laboratory does resemble a villain's basement." Master Severin points a stained finger at him. "That is because true knowledge requires atmosphere." The monk rolls his eyes. Along one wall stand rows of sealed jars labelled with chalk markings: sulphur, mercury, saltpeter, verdigris, ground antimony. You recognize a few names from earlier conversations about poison. The alchemist notices your attention immediately. Everything here is dangerous in the wrong quantity. He shrugs lightly, including water. Though admittedly mercury makes the point faster. He moves toward another work table where a little brass scale balances tiny mineral fragments. Poison fascinates noblemen because it feels invisible. He continues, "A sword is honest. Poison waits politely." The green fire snaps softly beneath the furnace. Master Severin lowers his voice slightly. There are substances that weaken slowly over months, powders hidden in cosmetics, metals dissolved into wine. He taps one glass jar carefully, and mixtures almost impossible to trace once swallowed. Brother Cuthbert stiffens faintly. You speak from study, I hope. Mostly. That word hangs in the room uncomfortably. The alchemist suddenly smiles thinly at your expression. Oh, relax. If I poisoned every noble who annoyed me, I'd never have time for experiments. Not entirely reassuring. A faint thud echoes somewhere beyond the stone wall behind you. Everyone pauses. Another thud follows. Brother Cuthbert frowns. What is beyond there? Old passages, Severin replies casually. Unused storerooms, mostly. The third thud sounds sharper, almost like metal striking stone. The monk exchanges a glance with you. Master Severin sighs dramatically. Wonderful. Either ghosts or thieves. He grabs a lantern from the table and motions for you both to follow. Beyond a narrow archway lies another corridor half choked with dust and abandoned crates. Cobwebs cling thickly between the beams overhead. The air smells older here, colder. The noise comes again. Clang. Severin raises the lantern higher. At the far end of the passage, partially hidden beside a collapsed shelf, kneels a figure rifling through wooden chests. The person startles violently at the light. A servant girl. Young, thin, terrified. Brother Cuthbert recognizes her first. You work in Lady Isabel's chambers. The girl freezes completely. Severin narrows his eyes. And what exactly are you stealing from my forgotten storage vaults? I wasn't stealing. Marvellous. Then we may all stop crouching in cellars at midnight. The servant girl clutches something tightly beneath her cloak. Brother Cuthbert steps closer gently. What is it? Slowly, reluctantly, she reveals a tiny glass vial wrapped in cloth. Dark liquid glimmers inside. The alchemist's expression changes immediately. Where did you get that? The girl's lips tremble. In the ladies' rooms. Silence settles through the underground chamber. Far above, muffled by layers of stone, monastery bells begin ringing the late-night hour. And beneath the keep, beside the strange fires and shadowed shelves of the alchemist's workshop, everyone stares at the little glass vial while the cold weight of suspicion shifts once more toward Lady Isabel's door. The bells overhead continue echoing faintly through the stone long after the servant girl stops speaking. In the wavering lantern light, the tiny vial seems far too small to carry so much fear. Master Severin takes it carefully between two stained fingers, while the girl stands trembling beside the dusty shelves. Brother Cuthbert watches her with visible concern rather than suspicion, which already makes him unusual compared to most people inside the keep. The alchemist uncorks the vial cautiously. A bitter herbal smell slips into the cold corridor. He murmurs. That means absolutely nothing comforting, Brother Cuthbert says. Severin ignores him. He tilts the vial slightly toward the lantern flame. Not arsenic. Not mineral. He sniffs again. Plant mixture. The servant girl wrings her hands together so tightly her knuckles whiten. I only found it, she whispers. I swear. Brother Cuthbert lowers his voice gently. Why were you searching Lady Isabel's chambers? The girl hesitates too long. Severin sighs because somebody sent you. At last she nods miserably. The steward. Of course. The castle now resembles a fishing net dragged through muddy water. Everyone searching everyone else. Servants spying on nobles. Nobles watching servants. Monks whispering with physicians while guards lurk outside bedchambers pretending not to listen. Fear has become the busiest resident in the keep. Severin corks the vial again. This proves nothing by itself, he says. Half the castle stores herbal mixtures. The servant girl looks relieved for almost half a heartbeat. Then he adds, though admittedly finding secret bottles beneath suspicious circumstances rarely improves anyone's evening. Not helping, Brother Cuthbert asks what the mixture might be. The alchemist turns the vial slowly, possibly sleeping draught, possibly heart medicine, possibly poison. He shrugs. Medieval chemistry remains delightfully imprecise. The monk rubs his forehead tiredly. You climb back toward the upper halls together, bringing the girl and the vial with you. The corridors feel colder now despite the crowded torches burning along the walls. Somewhere nearby, wind moans faintly through arrow slits like distant voices. Word spreads astonishingly fast. By the time you reach the great hall, household officers already gather near the hearth, whispering furiously. Lord Edric appears moments later wrapped hastily in a heavy cloak over his night tunic, his expression dark from interrupted sleep. Lady Isabel is summoned soon after. She arrives calm. Too calm, perhaps, judging from the suspicious glances round the room. The little vial rests upon the high table between them. Candles flicker across silver cups and half-cleared trenchers left from the evening meal. Outside, freezing rain taps softly against the shutters once more. Lord Edric speaks first. This was found hidden among your possessions. Lady Isabel studies the vial briefly before answering. Yes. That startles everyone. Even Brother Cuthbert blinks. You admit it, the steward demands. It is mine. The room erupts immediately into overlapping voices. The steward looks almost offended by how cooperative she is being. Lord Edric raises a hand sharply for silence. What is it? Lady Isabel steps closer to the table, a sleeping mixture. For whom? For my brother. Another wave of murmuring spreads through the hall. The southern lord still lies ill upstairs. Lady Isabel folds her hands calmly before her. He has suffered sleeplessness and pains of the stomach for months. She glances toward Master Odo. I used the mixture before long journeys to ease his discomfort. Master Odo narrows his eyes thoughtfully. What ingredients? Poppy, honey root, willow bark, mint. Severin nods faintly from the rear of the hall. Plausible. The steward rounds on him instantly. Plausible. Most medicines are plausible. That is their charm. Brother Cuthbert coughs suspiciously again. Lord Edric studies Lady Isabel carefully. Why hide it? At that, her composure slips slightly for the first time. Because this castle now treats every herb jar as murder. Silence follows. Honestly, she has a point. The steward presses onward anyway. Did you add this mixture to your brother's wine? No. To his food? No. To anything served during the feast? No. Lord Edric steps closer to the table. Then why did your brother speak of the cup before losing consciousness? Lady Isabel hesitates. At last she answers softly. Because he feared poisoning long before arriving here. That shifts the room again. Master Odo leans forward slightly. Explain. The lady looks suddenly tired beyond words. My brother became convinced someone sought his death months ago. He trusted almost no one. He made servants taste wine, change cooks repeatedly, accuse stewards of plotting against him. The rain intensifies outside. He once forced an entire household to eat from his plate before touching supper himself. Brother Cuthbert mutters quietly, That sounds exhausting. No one can quite agree whether powerful men grow paranoid because enemies surround them, Lady Isabel says, or whether paranoia itself creates enemies. The hall grows still again. Lord Edric studies her long and hard. You believe this illness may not be poison. Lady Isabel closes her eyes briefly before answering. I believe fear has been poisoning my brother for years. Those words seem to settle heavily over everyone present. because now another possibility enters the room. What if no assassin waits in the shadows at all? What if the Southern Lord's sickness comes from stress, poor health, rich food, endless wine, sleeplessness, and terror carefully cultivated inside his own mind? Medieval nobles are not exactly famous for balanced diets or emotional regulation. Yet before anyone can speak further, hurried footsteps echo from the corridor. A guard bursts into the hall breathless. "My lords." Everyone turns. The prisoner below is gone. The kitchen boy. The steward curses under his breath. How? The cell was opened. By whom? The guard swallows hard. We do not know. Instant chaos erupts again. Guards rush for the lower passages while servants scatter from doorways. Lord Edric barks orders across the hall, somewhere upstairs. Another bell begins ringing sharply through the keep. Master Odo remains strangely still amid the confusion. Then he says quietly, almost to himself, "Interesting." You ask what he means. The physician watches the scrambling household officers with tired eyes. If the boy were truly guilty, he murmurs, someone had reason to silence him. And if he were innocent, Master Odo glances toward Lady Isabel, the vial, the empty corridors, the frightened servants crowding the hall. Then someone wishes the castle afraid. The rain drums steadily against the shutters while guards race through the lower passages beneath the keep. And somewhere out in the dark beyond the walls, a frightened kitchen servant now runs through muddy winter roads carrying secrets nobody yet understands. The keep does not sleep at all that night. Torches flare along the walls while guards search every passage, cellar, stable, and storehouse beneath the castle. Horses are saddled in haste. Dogs bark themselves hoarse in the courtyards below. Snowmelt and rainwater splash beneath boots as men rush through the darkness carrying lanterns that throw wild shadows against the stone. The escaped kitchen servant has vanished, and with him vanishes the one simple explanation everyone had nearly convinced themselves to believe. You stand near the gatehouse beside Brother Cuthbert, while riders prepare to search the surrounding roads. This is becoming dramatically inconvenient, the monk mutters into his cloak. One guard overhears him. A man may have attempted murder. Yes, Cuthbert replies, inconvenient. The guard looks offended by the understatement. Above you, the wind rattles loose shutters along the upper towers. Rain sweeps sideways across the courtyard in silver streaks. Somewhere deep inside the keep, the Southern Lord cries out faintly in fever before falling silent again. The entire castle feels stretched thin. Near dawn, one of the search parties returns soaked and empty-handed. Another reports tracks leading toward the old pilgrim road before vanishing in the mud near the riverbank. No one can quite agree whether the boy fled willingly, received help, or perhaps never left the castle grounds at all. That last possibility troubles everyone most. By morning, the rain finally weakens into drifting mist. Exhausted servants stumble through their duties with red eyes and trembling hands. Kitchen fires burn low. Even the dogs seem too tired to bark anymore. Lord Edric orders the household chapel opened for continuous prayer. You follow the slow stream of servants, guards, and townsfolk climbing toward the small stone sanctuary tucked beside the inner wall of the keep. Candles already crowd the altar beneath painted saints blackened by centuries of smoke. The air smells of wax, damp wool, and cold stone. Near the front rests a reliquary recently brought from the abbey, a small silver box said to contain fragments of St. Alaric's finger bone. Some swear the relic protects against treachery and hidden evil. Others quietly note that St. Alaric himself died under extremely suspicious circumstances. Brother Cuthbert kneels briefly before the altar. You ask whether he believes in relics. I believe people sleep better when they feel guarded, he answers softly. Again, close enough. At the far side of the chapel, Master Odo speaks quietly with Lord Edric while examining a collection of small objects laid upon a cloth. The vial from Lady Isabel's chamber, scrapings from the silver goblet, bits of dried fig, a tiny spoon stained dark at the edges. The physician notices you approaching. Interesting thing about poison, he says suddenly. Cuthbert sighs. Everyone in this castle begins sentences that way now. Odo almost smiles. Real poison rarely behaves like stories claim. He picks up the spoon carefully. Some work quickly, others slowly. Some leave clear symptoms, others resemble ordinary illness. He pauses, and frightened witnesses tend to remember events badly. Lord Edric rubs weary eyes beneath the chapel candles. You still doubt poisoning altogether? Master Odo hesitates. I doubt certainty. The physician gestures toward the spoon. This utensil was used for sweet syrup during the feast, and it contains traces of foxglove. Silence settles across the chapel. Even the candles seem to flicker more quietly. Brother Cuthbert finally whispers, "That sounds important." It might be. Odo turns the spoon slowly in the candlelight. Foxglove affects the heart. In careful doses, medicine in excess. He lets the sentence fade. Lord Edric stiffens visibly. Then we have proof. Perhaps. That word again. The physician continues carefully, but traces alone mean little. Foxglove exists in many remedies. Contamination happens. Kitchen tools are reused constantly. You remember the herb woman from the still room lifting those same pale leaves carefully onto a higher shelf. Dangerous in careless hands. Lord Edric's jaw tightens. Who prepared the syrup? No servant immediately answers. At last, an elderly kitchen woman near the rear of the chapel speaks shakily. The confectioner, my lord. Where is he? Another silence. Then the steward pales visibly. He left yesterday morning. Perfect. The castle collectively sinks deeper into despair. Now there is another vanished servant. Another shadow. Another possible culprit slipping away into muddy winter roads before questions could reach him. No one can quite agree whether medieval households function mainly through loyalty or sheer panic. The chapel bells ring softly overhead. Lady Isabel enters quietly then, wrapped in dark wool with exhaustion carved beneath her eyes. She kneels near the altar without speaking while servants continue lighting candles around the relic shrine. One frightened maid touches the silver reliquary and immediately crosses herself 3 times. A stable boy whispers that saints reveal poisoners through dreams. Brother Cuthbert leans toward you slightly. Saints receive entirely too much administrative responsibility. Outside the narrow chapel windows, pale fog drifts across the valley below the keep. The world beyond the walls seems hushed and distant. Inside, however, tension coils tighter than ever. Master Odo eventually rises from the table of evidence. I wish to inspect the old kitchens, he announces. The old kitchens, the steward repeats. Before the new hall was built. Several servants exchange uneasy looks. The steward hesitates. They are mostly abandoned. Mostly. Storage now. Some passages collapsed years ago. Master Odo nods slowly as though confirming something private. Then that is precisely where we should look. You follow the small group descending once more beneath the keep. This time Lord Edric himself accompanies you alongside guards carrying lanterns and iron pry bars. The old kitchen passages lie deeper than the alchemist's chambers. The air grows colder and wetter there. Ancient soot still stains the ceilings black above cracked hearths large enough to roast entire oxen. Rusted hooks hang from beams. Water drips steadily somewhere unseen. Rats flee ahead of the lantern light. One guard mutters prayers beneath his breath. At the rear of the abandoned kitchen stands a narrow arch, partly blocked by fallen stone. Master Odo crouches beside it carefully. "Help me move this." The guards clear rubble aside slowly while dust swirls thick through the stale air. Beyond the arch waits a hidden storage chamber. Small, dry, forgotten. Shelves line the walls holding old jars wrapped in rotting cloth. And at the centre rests a wooden chest secured with iron bands. Lord Edric steps forward sharply. One guard forces the chest open with a crowbar. Inside lie bundles of dried herbs, glass bottles, powders sealed in wax, and beneath them all, silver cups. Dozens of them, carefully wrapped in linen. The missing cups the cupbearer had once been accused of stealing. Silence fills the underground chamber. Then Brother Cuthbert notices something else resting in the corner beside the chest. A pilgrim badge, freshly dropped, still muddy from recent use, meaning someone has been here very recently, perhaps only hours ago. The lantern flames tremble softly in the stale underground air, while everyone stares at the hidden cache beneath the ancient keep. And somewhere above you, distant bells begin ringing again through the fog as the mystery quietly changes shape once more. The hidden chamber beneath the old kitchen smells of damp cloth, dust, and dried herbs, old enough to remember previous kings. Lantern light flickers across the stolen silver cups stacked carefully inside the chest. Some bear the crest of Lord Edric's household. Others belong to visiting nobles who passed through the keep years earlier. The cupbearer's missing silver. At least part of it. One guard lets out a low whistle. "Well," Brother Cuthbert murmurs softly, "that certainly complicates the innocent speeches." Lord Edric kneels beside the chest grim-faced while Master Odo lifts one of the cups carefully into the lantern glow. Dust marks the rim. Nothing more obvious than that. The physician examines the pilgrim badge next. A small pewter token shaped like a scallop shell, the sort sold along pilgrimage roads to travellers seeking blessings at holy shrines. Fresh mud still clings to its edges. "No one can quite agree whether pilgrims travel for salvation," Cuthbert says quietly, "or because medieval roads offer very limited entertainment." The guard beside him fails to appreciate the joke. Lord Edric rises slowly. "The cupbearer lied." "Perhaps," Odo says carefully. "There are stolen cups hidden beneath my castle." "Yes." "And a servant escaped." "Yes." Lord Edric's patience visibly thins. "You're remarkably committed to uncertainty." The physician folds his hands inside his sleeves, because certainty arrives cheaply in frightened households. That earns silence. The guards carry the chest upward while the rest of you follow through the damp stone passages. Water drips steadily behind you, into shallow puddles reflecting the lantern light. Somewhere overhead, the bells continue tolling through the foggy afternoon. Back in the great hall, the stolen cups are laid upon the long oak table before gathered household officers and servants. The reaction spreads instantly. Shock from some, satisfaction from others. The steward looks almost relieved to possess something solid at last. Medieval investigations prefer physical objects, cups, keys, bloodstains, tiny mysterious bottles, much easier than untangling motives. The cupbearer is brought forward again. He stares at the silver in stunned silence, then lowers his head. "I took them." Murmurs burst across the hall immediately. Lord Edric's voice hardens. "Why?" The man swallows heavily before answering. "To sell. You robbed this household while serving at my table." "Yes, my lord." "Did you also poison our guest?" "No." The answer comes instantly. Too instantly, perhaps. The steward steps forward triumphantly. You expect us to believe you stole silver but stopped short of murder. The cupbearer lifts tired eyes toward him. Yes. Honestly, it is not impossible. Human beings are perfectly capable of committing one crime while being innocent of another far worse one. The man explains slowly under questioning. Gambling debts. Loans. Fear of dismissal. He hid the stolen cups below the old kitchens, intending to remove them gradually during market days. The escaped kitchen boy discovered the hiding place weeks earlier and threatened exposure unless given coin. So the two argued. Frequently, Brother Cuthbert mutters near you, there goes the exciting conspiracy involving Italian assassins. Not entirely, Severin the alchemist says from nearby. We still have suspicious herbs, vanished confectioners, and nobles behaving dramatically. Also fair. The cupbearer insists repeatedly he never poisoned anyone. He tasted the wine himself as always. He served the feast normally. He noticed nothing strange until the Southern Lord became ill. Master Odo watches him carefully throughout. Finally, the physician asks one quiet question. Who prepared the medicinal syrup served after supper? The cupbearer blinks. The confectioner. Again that vanished name hangs over the hall. Lord Edric orders riders sent immediately toward nearby towns and monasteries to search for the missing confectioner. Snowmelt roads make travel miserable, but urgency now outweighs comfort. Not difficult in medieval life, admittedly. The afternoon drifts slowly toward evening while questioning continues. Servants bring watered wine and coarse bread to exhausted guards. Candles are lit early against the deepening fog outside. Yet despite the new revelations, something still feels unfinished. Lady Isabel seems to sense it too. She stands near the hearth wrapped in dark velvet, watching the proceedings with narrowed eyes. At one point she quietly asks Master Odo whether Foxglove alone explains her brother's symptoms. The physician hesitates. Not fully. That answer unsettles her immediately. You notice. Foxglove may weaken the heart. Odo continues softly, but certain symptoms remain unusual. Then what else? I do not yet know. The hall grows quieter as darkness settles beyond the windows. Wind rattles the shutters while rain begins again in faint icy bursts. A servant arrives breathless from the sick room upstairs. My lords, he says shakily, the Southern Lord asks for his sister. Lady Isabel goes pale beneath the firelight. She climbs immediately toward the upper chambers with Master Odo following behind. You and Brother Cuthbert trail after them through winding corridors lined with flickering torches. The sick room feels dimmer now than before. Only a few candles burn beside the bed. Braziers glow low beneath layers of ash. The Southern Lord lies terribly thin among heavy blankets, his breathing shallow but clearer than earlier days. When Lady Isabel approaches, his eyes open weakly. For a moment the siblings simply look at one another. Years of history pass silently between them. Then the sick man lifts trembling fingers toward the physician. This sweets, he whispers. Master Odo leans closer. What sweets? Pear paste. Lady Isabel stiffens suddenly. The Southern Lord swallows painfully. After supper, memory returns slowly across his face like weak dawn light through fog. The confectioner insisted. He coughs harshly into the blankets, said it soothed digestion. Master Odo exchanges a sharp glance with Lady Isabel. Pear paste, she repeats quietly, with syrup. The physician nods once. Foxglove. Not wine. Not figs. The sweet medicinal paste served after the feast. The room stills completely. Outside, monastery bells begin ringing vespers through the rainy dark. The Southern Lord closes his eyes again from exhaustion while Lady Isabel grips the bedpost tightly enough her knuckles pale. No one can quite agree whether poisoners rely more upon cleverness, Brother Cuthbert whispers near the doorway, or simply upon everyone assuming danger hides somewhere more dramatic. The physician rises slowly. If the confectioner fled immediately afterward, he says, then perhaps we finally follow the correct shadow. Lord Edric arrives moments later, summoned from below. When he hears the revelation, his face hardens like frozen stone. Find him, he orders the guards. And suddenly the entire keep shifts once more, not toward hidden noble conspiracies or cursed cups or suspicious sisters, but toward one vanished servant somewhere beyond the castle walls carrying secrets through muddy, winter roads beneath darkening skies. Before dawn the riders leave the keep. You watch them disappear through the misty gatehouse beneath swinging lanterns and blowing rain. Hooves splash through muddy ruts while cloaks snap sharply in the cold wind. The search for the vanished confectioner stretches outward now along river crossings, pilgrim roads, monastery inns, and market towns buried beneath wet winter clouds. Inside the castle, exhaustion settles over everyone like dust after a collapse. The feverish tension of the past days has burned itself low. Servants move more slowly. Guards yawn openly during watch changes. Even the gossip has softened into quieter murmurs around kitchen fires and chapel candles. Only the bells continue unchanged. They mark dawn, then prayer, then breakfast, then noon. Time in the medieval world keeps moving whether mysteries are solved or not. You sit near the great hall hearth beside Brother Cuthbert, while kitchen women prepare morning pottage in heavy iron cauldrons. Steam curls upward through the smoky air carrying the scent of oats, leeks, and stale bread softened for reuse. Nothing in a medieval kitchen truly disappears. Yesterday's feast becomes today's stew with admirable determination. The monk warms stiff hands over the flames. I almost miss when everyone suspected poisoned goblets, he mutters. You preferred that. It felt more organized. Nearby, servants quietly remove extra guards from the wine cellar doors. The cupbearer remains confined, though no longer chained. The kitchen boy has still not been found. And the southern lord finally sleeps without fever for the first time in days. That alone changes the mood of the castle more than any argument or evidence. People breathe differently once death stops standing directly behind them. Near midday, a rider finally returns. Alone. Mudcoats both horse and cloak nearly to the waist. Rainwater drips from the rider's gloves as he stumbles into the hall before Lord Edric. The confectioner is dead, he announces hoarsely. Silence falls at once. The rider explains between exhausted breaths. They found the man near an abandoned roadside shrine several miles east along the pilgrim road. Not murdered violently, no sign of struggle. Just collapsed beneath a tree beside the frozen ditch. A small sack of coins remained untouched near the body. Master Odo asks the important question first. How did he die? The rider hesitates. The Abbey brothers who examined him believed sickness. That strange uncertainty again. The physician presses further. What sort of sickness? The rider glances uneasily toward the hall. They suspect poison. Of course. Brother Cuthbert closes his eyes briefly. We are trapped inside a very determined story. The hall erupts into uneasy whispers. Lord Edric immediately orders prayers for the dead man's soul, while riders are sent again to recover the body before wolves or weather claim it first. But the revelation changes things. If the confectioner truly poisoned the southern lord, then who poisoned the confectioner? Or did fear simply swallow another man already living too close to danger? No one can quite agree. By evening, the storm finally clears. For the first time in days, pale golden light breaks through the clouds and spills across the snowy valley below the keep. Water drips steadily from rooftops while crows gather along the battlements, drying their wings. The world looks tired but calmer. You walk the outer walls beside Lady Isabel wrapped in heavy cloaks against the cold air. Below, smoke rises peacefully from the town chimneys. Tiny figures cross the market square carrying firewood and baskets beneath the fading light. "My brother will live," she says quietly. It is not quite relief in her voice. More exhaustion shaped like gratitude. You ask whether she believes the confectioner guilty. Lady Isabel watches the distant Abbey Tower before answering. "I believe frightened men are easily bought." The wind lifts strands of hair loose from beneath her hood. "My brother once dismissed the confectioner publicly during another feast months ago, humiliated him before guests." She folds gloved hands together. Perhaps resentment grows more dangerous than poison itself, and his own death. She sighs softly. Perhaps he feared pursuit after the poisoning, a pause. Or perhaps someone feared what he might confess. Below the walls, monastery bells ring vespers across the valley. The sound drifts through cold evening air, softer now than before. Lady Isabel leans lightly against the stone battlement. "When we were children," she says quietly, "my brother feared wolves beneath his bed." You glance toward her. He made servants search the room each night before sleeping. A faint smile touches her tired face. Eventually our father told him something wise. "What was that?" "That fear feeds itself." The fading sunlight glows across the snow-covered fields beyond the town. For several moments neither of you speaks. Then Lady Isabel says softly, "I think my brother spent years searching for wolves long after they were gone." Behind you, the keep begins settling into evening routines once more. Kitchen fires roar warmer. Servants spread fresh rushes across the hall. Dogs wander hopefully near supper tables. The familiar rhythms of medieval life slowly return around the edges of the mystery. Brother Cuthbert later joins you near the chapel steps carrying a small loaf of coarse bread liberated from the kitchens under circumstances he describes as theological necessity. You share the bread while twilight deepens around the castle. "Do you think we'll ever know the full truth?" you ask. The monk considers this seriously, then shrugs beneath his wool cloak. Maybe the confectioner poisoned the sweets for coin. Maybe someone frightened him afterward. Maybe he poisoned himself while fleeing. He tears off another piece of bread, or maybe half these events simply tangled together by chance. That seems unsatisfying. Yes, he agrees. Reality often is. The chapel candles flicker behind the narrow windows beside you. Somewhere inside, monks chant evening prayers for the sick, the dead, and the frightened, which by now covers nearly everyone in the castle. The wind softens as night settles fully over the valley. Stars appear faintly above drifting clouds. Frost begins forming again along the stone walls beneath your hands. And though suspicion has not vanished entirely, it no longer grips the keep with the same desperate hunger as before. The poisoned feast already starts becoming story. Whisper. Legend. One more tale travellers will carry beside roadside fires while winter rain taps softly beyond the shutters. Morning arrives quietly at last. Not with alarms or shouting or racing footsteps through the corridors, but with pale winter sunlight spreading slowly across the valley beyond the keep. Frost silvers the rooftops below. Thin smoke rises straight upward from the town chimneys into still air untouched by storm. The bells ring softly from the abbey across the river. For the first time in many days, they sound ordinary again. Inside the castle, the great hall wakes gradually beneath the long beams blackened by centuries of smoke. Servants scatter fresh rushes over the stone floors while kitchen fires crackle warmly below. The smell of coarse bread and oat pottage drifts upward through the corridors. Life resumes. That is perhaps the strangest thing about medieval castles. Fear can sweep through them like winter wind. Yet by the next sunrise someone still needs to fetch water, mend harness straps, scrape kettles clean, and argue about missing onions. You sit near the hearth, watching pale light creep across the hall tables where suspicion once sat heavier than silver plate. Now the goblets stand harmless again. Or harmless enough. The southern lord continues recovering upstairs beneath layers of blankets and herb-smelling poultices. Master Odo prepares to return north by noon. The riders searching for answers have mostly returned empty-handed, and the confectioner's body rests in the abbey crypt awaiting burial beneath cold stone and uncertain prayers. No final confession ever arrives. No hidden letter reveals the full truth. Only fragments remain. A frightened confectioner, medicinal syrup mixed carelessly or deliberately, foxglove where it should not have been, a nobleman already consumed by fear long before the feast began. And somewhere between those pieces the real story quietly disappears into shadow. No one can quite agree afterward whether the poisoning was murder, revenge, desperation, or tragic misjudgment. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Some insist Lady Isabel orchestrated everything with elegant precision and merely hid her guilt well. Others swear the confectioner acted alone after years of humiliation. A few believe the southern lord's terror and poor health nearly killed him before any poison touched his lips at all. Brother Cuthbert privately suspects half the castle simply suffered from overeating during winter feast season. Honestly, that theory may deserve more respect than it receives. By afternoon, snow begins falling again beyond the walls. Gentle flakes this time, soft enough that even the crows seem quieter beneath the whitening sky. You walk once more along the outer battlements where the cold air smells of pine smoke, damp stone, and distant river water. Below, the market square moves slowly beneath canvas awnings dusted with snow. Merchants call lazily to passing townsfolk. Children chase one another around frozen puddles near the fountain. The world continues. Lady Isabel departs shortly before sunset. Her small escort waits in the courtyard with packed horses and fur-lined cloaks against the worsening weather. Before leaving, she pauses beside the chapel steps where candles glow warmly behind narrow windows. "You will carry the story onward," she says quietly to you. Perhaps she studies the falling snow, then carry this part carefully. Her gloved hands tighten lightly around the reins. Fear poisons more deeply than most herbs. The horses stamp impatiently in the cold. She offers the faintest tired smile before turning toward the gatehouse. Soon her escort disappears into the whitening dusk beyond the walls, swallowed gradually by drifting snow and muddy winter roads. Brother Cuthbert watches them go beside you. She'll become legendary by spring, he predicts. You think so. She owns too many perfumes and speaks too calmly. Medieval people cannot resist that combination. You laugh softly beneath your breath. The monk pulls his cloak tighter. Half the valley will insist she keeps hidden poison rings before Lent arrives. And the other half, they'll say she seduced an alchemist beneath the castle. He sighs. People become wonderfully creative during long winters. The snow thickens as evening settles. One by one, lamps appear across the town below like scattered embers glowing through the blue dusk. The abbey bells ring again over the valley, softer now, gentler. Inside the keep, servants close shutters against the cold night while kitchen boys carry the last buckets of water from the well yard. Dogs curl beside hearths. Candles flicker low behind narrow windows. The fear that once filled these halls begins fading into memory. Not entirely gone. Old castles hold on to unease the way wool cloaks hold smoke. Yet calmer now. Far calmer. Later, You sit alone near the dying fire in the great hall while snow brushes softly against the shutters outside. The benches stand empty except for scattered trenchers and forgotten cups left drying beside the hearth. The warmth feels deep and sleepy after so many cold, restless nights. You listen to the fire settle lower, to distant footsteps overhead, to bells drifting faintly from the abbey beyond the snowy dark. And slowly, the castle itself seems to exhale. The poisoned feast becomes smaller somehow in the quiet. Only one more winter story among thousands carried through medieval roads and monastery guest houses and smoky taverns, where travellers warm cold hands beside the fire and lower their voices when speaking of nobles. Perhaps that is how such tales survive longest. Not as certainty, but as whispers, as caution, as memory half softened by snow and candlelight. The fire beside you sinks lower into glowing embers. The hall darkens gently around the edges while the storm outside muffles the world beneath thick white silence. Somewhere above, a servant closes a distant door. Somewhere below, kitchen workers laugh quietly over the last of the ale before sleep. The keep rests at last, and you feel the long road waiting again beyond these walls. Frozen tracks through forests, roadside shrines glowing with tiny candles, monastery bells drifting through morning mist, cold rivers, warm bread, wet boots drying beside unfamiliar hearths, the slow, endless rhythm of the medieval world continuing beneath winter skies. So you remain there a little longer beside the fading warmth, listening to the wind brush softly against the stone while the snow buries old footprints in the courtyard beyond. And gradually, very gradually, the castle, the feast, the frightened nobles, the hidden cups, the whispered accusations, and all their uneasy shadows begin dissolving gently into the quiet dark. The bells ring once more across the valley, then fade, and the night grows still,